Hello, everybody. This is the 136th episode of iHearIC Radio, which began years ago as a weekly radio show on KRUI highlighting the Iowa City music scene. Has now, it's been relegated to just simply a monthly feature on the slightly more successful podcast, Rock Hard Caucus. I think slightly is accurate. I don't know. It is definitely more successful than my free college radio show. But
it's legendary, though, man. Rock Hard Caucus is. I mean, you've been doing that for so long. It's a legendary podcast.
We did celebrate 5 years recently, and I've been really ramping up like how frequently we produce stuff. So it's becoming more of a real thing. Anyway, usually I have someone over and we talk in my living room, and there's kind of like an in-person vibe to this. So it's going to be a different vibe today, but I don't think by any means it'll be not worse, just different. The reason being that my guests today, we are nowhere near each other, and so we have to just meet on the internet. We have to talk online. Actually, where are you right now?
I'm actually at my house. This is my home office here in Des Moines. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was listening, before I introduce you, I was listening to your show from a couple weeks ago, and I think you said you were in Colorado?
I was in Utah.
Utah.
Yeah.
Anyway, people love when I do this. I've got my guest's website pulled up. I'm going to read his very, very short biography that's on his website. Kristian Day is a producer, director, and writer for television, commercial, and branded content. So welcome to iHearIC Radio, Kristian Day.
Yeah, that is the most simplified way of saying it. I mean, my main gig is in the movie and TV world. But obviously we both have a passion for this state, even though sometimes this state kind of makes us angry sometimes. We both have
kind of all the time, but
all the time. I feel like this is what Texas feels like if you live in Austin, you know.
Oh yeah.
It's very similar, but
I mean, Austin's been, from what I can tell, it's gotten very, very much worse in the past few years.
Yeah. I mean, everything's a cycle. I always feel like everything comes and goes, ebbs and flows. And my solution to everything is just everyone just needs to do their job, whether that be going to work every day or, you know, doing something that promotes the other side, you know. And in fact, that came out. I heard that once from Conan O'Brien when Trump won the 2016 election, and when everyone was freaking out, he just said everyone just needs to do their job. If you're a comedian, if you're into satire, if you're a writer, everyone just needs to do their job. And that's sort of like my motto. Every time I get upset over something, I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to do my job. And I'd say that's kind of like almost how Last American Gay Bar, the show that came out over the summer, kind of originated. And, I mean, we have this state that we're definitely going off topic right now.
There's no set topic here. We can do whatever we want.
But you know what I mean? You have a state that was definitely pushing down LGBTQ rights, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to do something the exact opposite. I'm going to talk about a marginalized group that persevered and had almost like had this like kind of punk rock history to it, you know?
Yeah. And we did, we plugged that, like right before your show was coming out. We talked about that on Rock Hard Caucus because you had sent me the first 3 episodes, which was very nice of you. So yeah, that's, Last American Gay Bar, which you can watch on Out TV. And I think I heard it might be coming out somewhere else soon.
It's also on Amazon, and Apple and Roku as well.
Okay, cool. And that is a documentary series about the Blazing Saddle Gay Bar in Des Moines, which I've never been to, but I know that like during the 2020 like big anti-police protests, they got kind of like raided by the cops.
Yes, and that's actually in the last episode. We actually had they gave us all their security footage from it.
Oh shit, that's awesome.
Yeah,
well, you know, it's interesting to have that. Yeah.
What makes that interesting, because it's not just about, I mean, the center point is Blazing Saddle, but that Blazing Saddle is sort of the vehicle to tell Des Moines gay history, and it dates back to Stonewall. because we start off with 3 guys that went to Vietnam, and when they came back, it was like a whole new community for them. And at the time, like obviously everyone's in the closet who is gay. It was primarily male. So like the gay bars were male bars, but there was sort of like this weird punk rock underbelly going on. There were several gay bars, more than there are now. And a lot of them will say like some of them even today kind of miss those days because even though that they were around, everything was kind of left alone. Nothing really got politicized until the 80s when AIDS hit. Right. And then obviously when gay marriage became a situation and don't ask, don't tell. But it was sort of like the Wild West. No one interfered with them, but but there was also there's less gay bashing then because everyone just left each other alone.
Less of a spotlight on them.
Yeah, that's kind of what it was, and it was wild. I kind of describe it as like, it's sort of like the Castro district from like the Harvey Milk's era mixed in with like the dark underbelly of Cruising, the William Friedkin movie where all the, where it's like dudes in leather and Levi's cruising around like Central Park. And there's a similar deal in Des Moines. They would all hang out at Margot Frankel Park. And that's actually a lot of episode 2 is just like, the cruising world of Des Moines back in the 70s.
Yeah. So needless to say, if you watch the show, The Last American Gay Bar, you'll learn a lot about
more than you wanted to know.
the long history, the long gay history of Des Moines.
Yeah.
Since you brought up AIDS in the 80s, have you seen the new Reagan movie?
Not yet. It's on my list. It's on my list. Even if it's something I'm not like into, I'm just like, I'll give it a watch. I'll take a look and see.
You probably watch a lot of movies since, that's kind of like your thing, right?
Yeah. I do. I try to watch one movie a day, at least one a day. Okay. Yeah. It's hard. It's really hard in this day and age. But even things that I would not like, I haven't watched. What was it? That Sound of the Fury thing yet about the human trafficking? Because of course, it was like a
Sound of Freedom. I think it was
Sound of Freedom. That's what it was. Sound of Freedom. I haven't watched that yet, but I definitely like want to. Because as soon as something like makes a bunch of noise, whether I agree with it or not, I'm like, okay, let's see what they're doing.
I have not watched that either, but I know that's got a lot of real interesting people involved.
Yeah, it does, man. And but I got into the industry because I love horror movies. In fact, you can kind of see, and the people at home cannot see, but like everything from like these terrible movies like The Howling. I have every poster for the Howling series. That's Fantasy in Blue is an old adult movie. But I got into I love horror movies, not because of violence by any means. I'm not a violent person or love violence by any means, but I loved like fantasy, and I loved like these wild worlds that these writers and directors would compose. So that is what kind of got me into it. Now, my main focus has been documentaries over the years, mainly because that's something I've been doing it for so long. That is something I can do without a crew if I need to.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
With narrative films are obviously a lot harder, and I have to have a crew for it. It's just almost impossible because of the skills that it takes to make it work. And I do quite a bit of work with Peacock Kids. I actually have this, like, as much I do the work I do in the documentary world takes up a lot of my time and you hear about it. I also have this sort of a side hustle working in children's content. It started in like 2021. I wrote some scripts for NBC when they were trying to do these episodic, like really mini episodes for their YouTube channel, Peacock Kids, about what's that horse show? Spirit Untamed. And, okay. Yeah. I have two nieces who I love dearly, who I like kind of like channel their behaviors and energy when I write for them. So it's not just kids, it's also girls 10 and under, which seem to be my audience. And it's the weirdest thing. I never thought that would be like.
That's a great audience because they have a lot of money to spend.
Yeah, sure do. So one moment I'm working on serious documentaries, the one that just came out in August. It made it to #1 on HBO, was Taken Together, about Lyric and Elizabeth from Waterloo.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I was a producer on that. That was when I worked with Dylan Sires on for like 5 years before we actually sold it.
Yeah, I heard about that. I didn't realize that you had worked on that.
Yeah, I was one of the original three. So it was Dylan was the first one, and then Ned Mohammedamish from Waterloo. They went to college together at UNI, and I think they were both working at KWWL. Cause the story goes like Dylan dropped out of school cause he got a job at KWL, and then he was the first photojournalist on the scene when the girls went missing.
Right.
And then he decided he wanted to dive more into it and started this doc project, I think he actually started in 2015. So like 3 years after the girls went missing. And then Ned jumped in that same year. And then Dylan and I met on a set. He was a set decorator for a narrative series. And, he picked me up from my house as he rented a bunch of band equipment from me. And we were talking in his old band van, his touring van. And he invited me to come and watch the footage, and I got involved that way. So a lot of the old interviews were done between the three of us until we sold it to Warner Brothers.
Yeah. I'm going to have to make sure that my wife knows about that, because she loves stories about, kidnappings and abductions and stuff.
It's sad.
It's real fun, huh?
Yeah. I'm honestly, between you and me, and I guess everyone who's listening, like, I'm not a huge true crime guy. Yeah. I do have one more true crime series coming out this year. It wasn't a series, it's a movie. It'll come out in December about the Chief Saholic, who was the Kansas City Chiefs fan who wore the wolf costume.
Bridget was telling me about that.
Yeah, Bridget was on it with us.
Fun.
Yeah. She's great. Saw her yesterday. She made me Rice Krispie treats for my birthday. Which you and I share the same birthday, don't we?
Yeah. I now that you mentioned it, I was going to get to that at some point.
Happy birthday to you.
And to you also. I listened to the 319th episode of your radio show, Iowa Basement Tapes, which was the birthday episode. And I don't think I knew before that we share a birthday. And, I'd wanted to have you on this show for a while. And then I heard that. It's like, well, it's September. We got to do our birthday show.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Basement Tapes, I'll tell you, is like the one thing that I think is still pure in my life, because corporations have not touched it. And
right.
There's like radio and the podcasting, because it does broadcast on the radio and it gets archived in a podcast format. Like, it's not a money making thing for me. It's just something I've been passionate about for Iowa, my love of Iowa and the love of punk rock. And, this kind of like, this like lost history that almost could be lost, but I've kind of taken it upon, like, I need to archive all this stuff as I can. And, but it's like the one thing, like, no one can take this away from me, is what I always tell myself. So like when the pandemic hit, and then when like last year was a really hard year for the film industry because of the strikes. And even though I work in the doc world, it kind of like, it affected us too. Cause it wasn't like,
you couldn't film your like reenactments, right?
Yeah, well, you can't do that. But also, like, some people who are kind of naive are like, well, they're not buying narrative films. There's no writers, so they're buying docs, right? I'm like, not necessarily, Does that happen in the early 2000s? That's what started reality TV was the writer's strike. And that's how, like, shows like, The Bachelor and, Survivor and all those, Big Brother, all like really took off. And there was reality TV before that, with MTV having Real World and Road Rules, but it really became mainstream in the early 2000s. But like unfortunately, that's not really happening now. So it's like when that strike hit and all the networks and streaming services stopped buying, we were already $60,000 in debt on the Chief Saholic thing, and no one was buying stuff because we had talked to Netflix, and Netflix knew about it because our EP was the director of Pepsi Where's My Jet, and they said, don't show this to anyone but us, and we did, and then they didn't get it, so we were like, oh no. And I had nothing going on at that point. I took myself off the gig market, and so all I had left was really like Iowa Basement Tapes to like keep me sane. And even though it doesn't make me any money, it was just something like, okay, I have to do this every week. I love doing it. I am just going to dive in, I'm just going to bootstrap my own personal spending and just do my radio show. and let time pass. And it's just one of those things that has just always been there. You know, I mean, we're in our 6th year now.
Yeah. And that I've found that, you know, at least having like one thing that's like structured that you do on a regular basis, it helps keep you like, you know, it keeps the ball rolling. That's how it is for me anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there are days like when I'm in the middle of Utah and I'm like, damn it, I still got to do my show this week. And I'm in an RV with very little internet and I'm having to I'm with my dad and my uncle on this motorcycle trip and I need to record my voice and we're off a highway and I'm just like, I'm going to go sit in my dad's truck. Holding my snowball mic in my hand, trying to get my voice tracks down. So, but it has been such a, you know, I've met so many cool people and I've met a lot of people who've just come out of the woodwork because they heard the show and they're like, hey, I was in this, like the Slim Tones. I found the Slim Tones on a comp tape called Squirrel Energy Now, which was a thing back in Iowa City in the early 90s. And a guy gave me the tape. I scanned the artwork, digitized the tape, put it up on the archive. One of the band members found it, reached out to me, and he's like, I have stories I would love to like talk to. And I was like, well, let's have you on the show. And it just opens up these doors of Iowa's like, kind of like, I mean, there is a lot of archival out there between fanzines and flyers and all those things. But, you know, like Iowa City, for example, is super transient. So people come and go all the time. Whereas a lot of the guys that were in bands in Des Moines, a lot are still here or they may have passed. Iowa City is so coming and going. You know, it's people there for college but, you know, finding these people through the show has just been such a great, you know, experience. Yeah.
And that's what first attracted me to, Iowa Basement Tapes is the Bandcamp page, which is massive. You have just like hundreds of, you know, little tapes and stuff archived here. I've got so much going through my head right now.
Well, I want to say,
yeah, go ahead.
I want to say I wasn't the first person to archive. I got inspired to archive because, you probably know him, Ben Smasher. He lives just outside of Iowa City.
I might, but maybe not by that name.
Yeah, his name's Ben. His kind of we call him Ben Smasher or just Smasher. I knew him in high school in Cedar Rapids. He's lived kind of between Cedar Rapids and Iowa City a lot.
Wait, did you grow up in Cedar Rapids? I thought you were in the Quad Cities.
Both, actually. I was born in the Quad Cities, went through 7th grade there. Then my mom and I moved to Cedar Rapids and I went to Prairie. I graduated from Prairie.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That's where I met
graduated
Ben.
From Washington. So.
Oh, what year?
2008.
2008. I was 04. Yeah. So we were like ships in the night. It was a wild time living out there back then. You would have been there when the floods happened.
Yes. 2008 was when the floods happened. So yeah, I graduated high school and then, you know, a few weeks later the town was underwater and I was like putting up sandbags at, you know, various people's houses out in the boonies. Yeah. That was
a wild time. I mean, I was in Ely, on the south side, so I didn't live in town. But at that point, I think I had moved back from Colorado at that point because I moved to Colorado like 3 days after I graduated high school and then came back in, 07. And I remember I was shooting a movie because I was back when the tax incentives were starting. We're still in place. And I remember those storms because we got them we had floods too, not like Cedar Rapids. But it was incredible. It was one of those things that kind of like, and I hate to say that because it was devastation, but it almost needed to happen to force Cedar Rapids to rebuild and start fresh. And that's, again, if I was there at the time, I'd say, Kristian, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. And that it was horrible. We lost our home and our family, our dog drowned. But it was. And when I go back to Cedar Rapids now, it is amazing to see how the city itself rebuilt. It's, you know, and came back.
Yeah. I have. Yeah. I don't know. There's sort of like gentrification stuff going on in that area that kind of.
Oh, like I'm sure. I'm sure.
But, yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing is about Cedar Rapids is like, I remember my high school girlfriend and I, her aunt, we used to go to her apartment, which was in this building called Commonwealth that was off of 2nd Avenue.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is now, but it was definitely like subsidized housing. And I remember there was a corpse of a bat that was at the bottom of the stairs that was there for like at least a year every time we would go over there, because that's where we could go and be unsupervised when you're like 17.
Pretty sure I delivered pizzas there a few times.
Yeah, it's questionable, you know. It's a questionable place. But there was also like, I mean, I completely understand the gentrification part. 'Cause I mean, where like New Bohemia is, I mean, that was like the Czech Village. I remember going skateboarding down there when it was way more urban in my day, and now it's very kind of yuppie, you know. If that's the word you want to use. But what I was getting at earlier is I wasn't the first person to do the archiving. Ben Smasher started 319 Dude, which is an amazing
That's what I thought you were
archive.
talking about. Yeah.
Yes. 319 Dude. He started that in like 2012, I think. And I remember when he showed it to me, because he had his own collection, and Ben was pretty involved with the local like hardcore and metal and punk rock scenes. Like he would do house shows in his basement in Cedar Rapids, and he had a bunch of stuff that some of it I had heard of, some of it I haven't, some of it was around when I was a kid. But he said something that stood at the top of my mind, was like, I care about this stuff because I don't think anyone else does. And at that time, he was probably right. I think more now people have like discovered all these archives, and now they're like getting into it, which I'm stoked for. John Burns from the Quad Cities, he was in Meth and Goats and does Centaur Noir, and he's also in, he's in one other band that I'm my mind's drawn a blank, but he started the Quad City Music Archive, on Bandcamp as well. And there's a little bit of like crossover between the three of us, with stuff.
Yeah, I know that you play stuff from the 319 Dude archive on your radio show.
Yeah, one of my favorites. I mean, there's the PPs are on there, Brazil and Vita Blue, which were like big ICCR bands back in the day, especially in like the early hardcore scene of Eastern Iowa. Was really just like between Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, and Davenport, like the hardcore scene there was just like, it was an amazing thing. And I don't think I appreciated it then.
Yeah. What time period are you talking about?
So like 99, 98 to about, I mean, probably 2005, 2006.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like I like just missed this. I'm a little bit too young.
Well, it was just because that was like when Screamo happened, you know,
Sure, yeah.
And like Des Moines had a couple bands, like they had In Loving Memory, who just got back together last year. Rue Morgue was another one. Eclipse of Eden. And in Cedar Rapids, there was Cedar Rapids and Iowa City had a combo band called Brazil, which had Matt Davis from Vita Blue / 10 Grand, which he was an Iowa City guy. And so like half of them were Iowa City, half of them were CR. CR also had the PPs, which was sort of like a crusty's the word, oi punk band. And then the Sadistic Kids, who I think should have earned an award for they just never quit. Like those guys were, I think, were raging towards 30, and they started when they were like 15, and that's when they finally stopped.
Wow. I mean, that's a good run.
That's a good run. Yeah. I only found one. There's only like one demo out there, I think. I think they did the split with this band called Epileptic Cheetah, but there just wasn't a whole lot out there. And, you know, then during that time, you gotta think about like now we have Bandcamp, but before Bandcamp, there was like mp3.com. And
Sure.
that was and then before that, it was just like the demo tapes and CDRs. And Ben became kind of important in this and like distribution, because he was like the only friend I knew at that time that had a CD burner. And that was like a hot commodity in like 2001, 2002.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's where a lot of these things kind of came from, is he was the one taking the tapes and burning them onto CDRs for people.
He's basically the press. Yeah.
Yeah. He was the press. Yeah.
I did want to kind of confront you actually about something that you said on your birthday episode. If you don't mind me just playing a clip of yourself back to you,
Sure.
And this will be another thing we can argue about, but
okay. If I was going to introduce anyone to awesome, rad Iowa music, this is what that would be. So there'll be no Slipknot or any of that garbage.
okay. So, I mean, I think if I'm hearing you right, you called Slipknot garbage.
I did. I did.
Is that how you feel about that band?
Yeah, because when I was like coming of age into music, that was when they got big. That was when the self-titled dropped, you know, and I felt like they got so big so fast that it overshadowed the rest of the music that was happening in Iowa. And it had the exact opposite effect that, like when Nirvana hit and Seattle happened.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, there was this thought that when Slipknot hit, okay, now maybe Des Moines or Iowa City or maybe Iowa will happen, you know?
Yeah.
Because honestly, the population of Iowa is probably equal to that of the entire city of Seattle.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? But like there's thought. And I remember, cause there is a super, I'm not announcing this because it's shelved right now. I have a Slipknot documentary called Paul and Joey, and it's about Paul Gray and Joey Jordison. And it was brought to me by Paul Gray's widow, Brenna. And when I interviewed several people, some of the original members of Slipknot, and
Did you talk to Anders?
That was about the time I stopped, was when Anders, cause he's at the time, this is before he started touring again with, I think he reformed Painface for a minute. He was a rural, mail carrier in like Grimes or something. And it was really hard to nail him down. But I did talk to like Davo was really important to the scene in the late 80s, in the mid 90s. He had a band with Joey and Paul called the Have Nots. And that was when Paul and Joey were ready to quit Slipknot because it wasn't going anywhere. So they formed a punk band that was very much like TSOL called the Have Nots. And then all of a sudden they broke. And
so that would have been right before they signed with Roadrunner.
Yeah, this was like 97. But there was a lot of conversation that multiple people whose names I'm not going to mention had said during when they were starting to do their interviews in press. A member of the band, one member of the band who's still alive, still here today, had mentioned that when they asked, so what is the Iowa music scene is like? And they said there isn't any, and it's a wasteland. And so that, unfortunately for me, I'll say this, I love the history of Slipknot because we're all 6 degrees away from each other in some way. And Jim Root's band, Atomic Opera, is actually pretty sick, and I have 2 of their tapes up on the Bandcamp.
I've heard of them. I've never. Oh, you have that up on here?
Yeah, it's handwritten too. Yeah, Atomic Opera.
Yeah, I gotta look at that.
It's sick. It's actually it's very Metallica worship, but it's cool. And then I have Joey Jordison's band, Monfidius, is on there too, which was like his.
Okay, I did not
his grindcore
realize
band.
You had that up here. Yeah, because I've really only gotten into Slipknot in like the past year because we've been doing this like podcast series, sort of like learning more about them. Because Evan and I, the co-host of Rock Hard Caucus, we were not really into music this heavy growing up, and so we're kind of like looking back and like trying to catch up. Yeah, but like in the early days, I was like reading about all these other bands they were in, and like Motifidius is such a funny name. So to know that like you have the like existing like digital archive of these is so great. I'm so glad you have this.
Yeah, well, that I liked. I mean, I genuinely liked those. And then they had a band called I don't think Paul was in it. I know Joey was in it. Maybe he was in it. It was called Anal Blast.
Yep,
and
I knew about them too.
And their singer, so they sounded a little more technical than Anal Cunt, but the band itself, like their singer looked like Seth Putnam, like a big fro and everything, and just as kind of sloppy. Yeah. But I got a wild story about Monfidius. So, that tape, so my buddy Nate Fetus, who's in Traffic Death, I was at his house and he said, "Hey, I have a Monfidius tape. Do you want to digitize it?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I do." And he had another tape. And I believe, it's probably, if you're on my archive, I don't have it up, but there's another band. It's a tape that looks really close to it. But God, like, it's not Incantation. It's, shoot, I might have to look it up myself unless you have it up.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything.
I can
is
find
it
it real quick.
Incarnated?
Incarnated. Okay, yeah, Incarnated. So, All right.
Spiritual Embodiment is the name of that tape.
So that label, which was like a DIY label, obviously, like put out the Mudfidius tape and that tape. And I was over at there's a vintage stereo shop in town in Valley Junction, and I was down there and I was talking to my buddy Kevin, who was in this documentary I was shooting because he grew up with Joey. In fact, they did a drum battle with each other. And I was talking to him and I was telling him about that tape, and I mentioned one of the guy's names, and he's like, "You're never going to believe this, but that guy, he's literally across the street getting a beer because I'm fixing his turntable." And no joke, that guy came in. I was like, "Yo, are you so-and-so?" And da-da-da-da-da. And, I'm excited. So like when I get excited, I'm like jumping around. I'm like, "Are you in this band? Were you around?" And he's like, yeah. I haven't talked to Joey in a while. I'm like, "Well, you probably haven't because he just died. So, I mean, you probably haven't talked to him." And he's like, "Oh." And he
didn't even know. Oh my God.
He didn't even know. And we were just talking a little bit, but like I was trying to get him on the show because like that's a whole faction of dudes who I really don't know a whole lot about. And Joey was one of the most talented people. Paul and Joey were like really, to me, they were the music makers of that band. I mean, they wrote the songs. There's actually, when Paul died, that's when Donnie Steele came back, and Donnie Steele, there's actually an unreleased Slipknot album that is written by Donnie and Joey. That was post
would this have been
death.
So this would have been, post Paul's death. Okay. So like around the time of like Grey Chapter, or like right before that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Wow. So in the process of like doing that series, I was reading like a lot of the like early press about them and like early sort of like biographical books, and like, the way that everyone from outside would talk about Iowa is like so demeaning. It's like,
and that's where I got really,
people know about music in this little quaint.
I got really offended by that because I'm like, you guys were all a part of this, and they were part of that scene, I mean, Sean owned the Laughing Iguana. Was it Laughing Iguana or was it Safari Club? I think it was Safari Club.
I think he owned Safari Club, yeah.
And
okay, I actually, now that I've got you, that Iguana place, is that the one that was like multiple floors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I'll have to go back and remember like what
and
my
I believe
question was about
before
that.
it was Laughing Iguana, I think it was So's Your Mother. And I'd written an article about So's Your Mother for City View once. It is hard to keep track because we've had so many of these like small bar venues over the last like 30, 40 years,
I think that the Iguana place came up on a previous episode, and I was like trying to figure out where it was, and I couldn't track down like the history.
Yeah, there's not much out there. I think Safari Club, because Sean's dad bought it for him, and he ran that bar until Slipknot took off. And when Slipknot took off, he sold it. And then, he was part of all these. In fact, one of his favorite bands was this band called Skrid, which was an Iowa City sludge metal band from like the early 90s. And they were all part of it. But when they signed and they were blowing up, and their response to the Iowa music scene was, "There's nothing there. It's a wasteland." I mean, that was probably the moment where I'm like, up to that point, I was like, I'll respect it. Not my cup of tea, really. I mean, I listened to metal and grindcore, but I just wasn't super into it. But then when I heard that, it just kind of felt like, it was just kind of disappointing, because Iowa's history in DIY, punk rock, metal, whatever, is pretty strong. And what I love about it, we have generations of musicians who come up and they have these ideas, and they're come up with new ideas. And some of them are almost rehash of some of the stuff that happened decades before, but they don't know it. And I love to share it with them, because I'm just like, man, there's something in the air. There's something in the water that is bringing this creativity out in us. And I love seeing it kind of come full circle sometimes, and come back from, it kind of dissolves mainly because of style or whatever, but then it comes back. And when you start really looking at the type of music from different parts of the state, like Dubuque has been harboring like doom metal for decades. I don't know what it is, but like the sludgiest, slowest, like everything from Telekinetic Yeti to Space Burial to Dredge. And it's just like, what is coming out of there to make that happen? And Iowa City's always had this like a mix of punk rock and then like this really lo-fi bedroom style of music that I thought was always super interesting. The more experimental, I think Iowa City's had more experimental music than any other part of the state.
Yeah, I definitely come out of that scene more than anything, but I've been very embedded in the current era of the DIY punk crowd, and it's the shit that the energy that these people have to like do all of this playing
great.
shows like multiple times a week. They're like, goddamn, how do you have?
I know. When you get to our age, you're just like, man. I haven't been to a show. I was actually going to go tonight. I was going to drive to Cedar Rapids to go see Judas Priest play.
Oh yeah,
but I have to fly to LA tomorrow, and I just got back from this motorcycle trip like Tuesday, and I was just like, I'm tapped out. I can't do anymore.
Yeah. Well, okay, so elephant in the room. You're not going to Knotfest tonight.
No. Well, it's funny because like my favorite, like, I guess national act or whatever is Gwar, and Gwar's playing Knotfest. And,
I know.
And I will usually go to Gwar if they're within 100-mile radius or 200 miles, just as Gwar's my favorite show, to see. No matter what album they're promoting, whatever it is, it's just always a good time. And then, the boys in Vended, which are all like Slipknot. Well, two of them are Slipknot kids.
Yeah.
I've produced, 3 or 4 music videos for them over the years, and they're good kids. You know, they easily could be, fall under that whole Nepo thing, but they're very like, they were all extremely courteous and polite and generous and great to work with, and they have a good time. And I'm again, not my cup of tea for music, but I do enjoy them. Their lead guitar player, Cole, I mean, he's a homie. I really like that kid a lot.
Yeah, that's good.
They're all good dudes.
It's good to hear. Yeah. I think they're about to like go on a pretty big tour from what
They are, yeah. They just put out their album. Their album just dropped like yesterday or today, or I think it was yesterday.
I think I saw a post about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm proud of them.
I think I caught the end of their set last time there was a local Knotfest, which they were like maybe the first or second band to play that day.
I'm sure. I mean, they think they're not the first this time, but I think they're maybe I don't know how many bands play Knotfest, but I mean they're a little bit later. But those kids have really worked for it. I mean, when we get our budgets for those things, I mean, we don't have a lot to work with, and they're all like getting their resources together to like make it happen. They're very DIY in that sense. I mean, they do have a management team and all that. And this first record they did was, I think they 100% financed it themselves, and they didn't work with a label. As they said to me, they're like, we want to own our first album. And, so that's very like, that's something that's something there. I mean, they're very smart about it. I mean, even in today, it's forward thinking. But I was really impressed with them. And then like when we were like in between takes, and Simon will go and change, like get on Spotify and put on something like Cephalic Carnage or some type of extreme grindcore band that is not commercial at all. I'm like, all right, these guys are they know, like they're into cool stuff, but they're also following, they also know like how they need to like market to get to that Slipknot level, like that commercial level, which, I don't necessarily like that, but they're also trying to make a living, and I'm not going to fault them for that. So
sure, yeah, and obviously they have some advantages given their
they
followers,
do,
but.
Yeah, they do. To say that their management company, who also just seems to be, who is also Slipknot's manager, you can't say that there's nothing there, from a Nepo side, but I mean, I know just watch, I mean, one of them does drive a very nice truck. The rest of them are in like, your average 20-year-old vehicle with over, 200 miles on it. They're just trying to, their parents have been really good parents to them. So, but I can tell you when we did this one music video, Griffin, who's, it's Corey Taylor's son, we were shooting in this warehouse, that was a fiberglass, and the poor kid he's wearing around shirtless, had fiberglass all over his body, and he was just like miserable, absolutely miserable. And I'm trying to explain to him, like, I'm sorry, dude, cold shower. And this is like middle of October. He's like cold shower. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, this sucks. And then I said Cole, and like that Cole's such a good kid, but I remember we would do these shots, and then he would come up to me. Cause the first video I didn't produce, I was just the gaffer on it. Cause part of my business is I rent out film equipment, so like the lighting gear. And, so I lit the scene, and then I smoked it up with like this fog. And then there's a scene of them jumping around, and like, after the camera reel's cut, and then Cole would come up like, hey, did that look cool? Just like very like kind of like nervous about it,
Bridget told me like a very
man.
similar story that they were like really concerned that like, did that look cool what we just did?
Yeah. So the video that Bridget worked on, I was, so simultaneously with the Chiefsaholic thing, I couldn't be in two places at one time. And Bridget, who's worked with me for 2 years now, I said, all right, I'm going to give you these videos to, produce and assistant direct, which I mean, and she was also the art director. So it was very tough. And I worked with her, trying to I don't want to hold hands, but just like I do, like kind of like peek over the shoulder to make sure like, things are going okay.
Sure. She's your apprentice.
Yeah. And she picks up the mess and makes sure I eat sometimes, cause there's days. But she, I absolutely was blown away. She is like their age group, but I think was better because I just turned 39. I'm a bit older than all those kids. So I think she could probably like, she'll fit in with them a little bit more. And, she's just very, I don't want to use the word gentle, but she knows how to work with them from like, you don't need to be freaking out with talent or anything. But she did such a good job in those last two videos. Hats off to her for getting it, working with the DP and the director and the band. And those last two videos I just thought were like aces for them. They did such a good job.
Yeah. I haven't actually watched them yet, but I've seen them going around. So
they're cool.
People
they're
seem
cool.
to like them. Yeah.
They do. Yeah. The one I gaffed, it was a little bit more simplified. I remember it was in the fiberglass warehouse, and, a lot of setups, and it was just late night, and, you're just trying to get it done. And, music videos are kind of a dying breed, like,
yeah. They don't make money really, right?
Right. They don't. It's not like there's no MTV. There's no like, and I always say that a lot of times they're kind of a waste of money because you just like, what do they do? Live and die on YouTube, Right. And rightfully so. There's no money. There's no budgets. There's no money in them. I think we did the last two vended videos, which did have a budget. They had $19,000 to do two videos, and there was a lot to do. And
sorry, your voice just cut out.
Right, yep. Hold on. I saw it.
It's all right. I will say while you're fixing that, Bridget, if you are listening to this, I haven't watched the music videos you worked on, not because I'm not interested in your work, but because I have to save all Slipknot related content for potential podcast material. So I will watch it eventually.
I love that you're pushing it. Now that we've gone on our long Slipknot conversation.
Yeah. Okay, so rewinding to something you said earlier where your radio show, Iowa Basement Tapes, is something that's like all under your control. You don't have you're not like involving yourself with any like major film studios or anything. So I guess what I wanted to ask you, like, I consider you to be, kind of a deal maker. You have to be to, sell documentary series to streaming services and stuff. So, Out TV, Amazon, Netflix, Paramount Plus, are those more difficult to work with than the radio stations KFMG in Des Moines, KWIT in Sioux City, KOJI in Okoboji, and KWIC in Decorah.
All I get from the radio stations is you let an F-bomb slip on one of the songs. Don't let it happen again.
Oh yeah, I've had that conversation too.
And I'm like, I didn't hear it. And then I'm like, it was there and I didn't, I'm trying to do my best. I mean, I don't let it slip, but like songs, sometimes you can't understand them. And I'm like, I didn't hear it,
Yeah. Well, your show, why don't they just air the show later?
I know. Well, I mean, and at one point, so KFMG's like been the only one that's ever like, because they have, like, KFMG was started back in the 60s, and I can tell you that I'm the youngest person who has a show on there, and everyone there just comes from a different age, and there's these older guys that just, I swear, they are literally listening to my show. They pass their bedtime just to catch an F-bomb. And
these are like FCC plants.
Yeah, like, because it's so KFMG, for those who don't know, has a limit. It's an LP. It's a low power station. So unless you live in the city of Des Moines, you're not going to hear it. And, I can sometimes get it when if I'm driving out to Waukee to my mom's house. But as soon as I get like past West Des Moines, it is gone. And so it's not, how can I say this? I'm like, the FCC's not listening because they're not getting the signal, but the local FCC, which is the other like, hosts and producers who just happen to stay up past 9 o'clock on a Thursday, I will get a note the next day saying, excuse me, we're going to get shut down if you let that happen again. I'm just like, no one can hear it.
Yeah.
The station manager, sometimes the station manager will text me in the moment. He's like, I'm listening to the show. Love it. FYI. I think we were listening to Pit Lord, which was the barbecue metal band out of CR, the ones that use a drum machine and bring out like literally a barbecue on stage and flip burgers.
Okay. I like the sound of this.
They're great. Yeah. They play the Metal Fest that Iowa Metal Underground puts on a couple times a year. And,
I've definitely seen their name like on a poster somewhere.
Oh, they're great. I mean, their gimmick is good too, because they'll be up there, smoke coming out of the grill, and they're playing. It's awesome. KWIT and KOJI, the Siouxland Public Media. I've gotten a lot of fans out of Western Iowa, even though that's probably the area that I play the least amount of music from.
Sure.
Just because Sioux City used to actually have a very vibrant punk rock scene. In fact, Emery, I forget his first name, but he's the guitar player for TSOL. He moved there with his wife Gia, and they have a music clinic in Sioux City.
Oh, cool.
But Sioux City considers itself more of a part of like the Omaha scene than they do the rest. Like they don't really, even when I communicate with them, they feel like they're more connected with Omaha than they are like Des Moines or Iowa City. And then Okoboji, is definitely like kind of in that circle. But Sioux City, I will say, I've gotten like fan mail from there where people have sent me like 7 inches in tapes to check out and flyers, just because they're fans of the show.
Yeah.
And I've had people email me that their new favorite band is like Sioux City Pete or Verb the Noun. Cause when I first started on that station, they were really pushing it hard, and like people were sending me stuff. There was a band called the Ruralist who were from Sioux Center. Like they were all getting on board with it. Now Decorah, I get less feedback out of Decorah. I think they're also limited because they're a college station with Luther, and they share the same, frequency as like some other stations. So they broadcast, I think, from like 10 in the morning to, I think I'm their last show on Saturdays. Yeah. And then it actually switches to another deal. I don't know what it is exactly, but one of the earliest punk bands from Iowa originated from Decorah. They were called the Dogs, and that's up on the Bandcamp archive. They were like Iowa's answer to the Stooges. And
okay, cool. The Dogs.
They started in 73, But the awesome. 7-inch and the album, I don't think came out until like late 70s. And if you look at the cover, it's a dude, you know, with a dog leash on it, with this long hair. And it's just like, this is, it's pretty wild, man. I was just like, and that guy, I forget the name, but he just returned to Decorah a couple years ago to take care of his ailing father. So he's back in the area.
The guy with the dog collar on?
I believe that's him. I've never actually physically seen these guys. I hope it is. That would be very cool. That's like when I was really starting to do the archive, I was really like pushing like the dogs. I'm like, you need to check these guys out because this is that part of like lost punk rock history that I'm talking about. Like Decorah, Iowa. That's the first Iowa punk band is from Decorah, not Des Moines, not Iowa City.
Yeah.
You know, Des Moines' first punk band was a band called White Lunch from 1978. I don't think they recorded anything except for like some boombox stuff, but there was a Des Moines Register article about them.
Awesome.
And then that turned into The Law, which was a, Charlie Chesterman. I believe that was his name. He was in both bands, but he went to the UK. And when he came for like a family trip, came back with all these records, including like Sex Pistols and all this stuff, and started sharing it with everyone. And he started his next band, The Law, and they had that album, King Size Cigarette. And that was like punk rock, but like more like a pop punk kind of, like the Smithereens or something.
Sure, yeah.
You know, but that's the type of stuff that I just get super, super excited about. You know?
And that's what's frustrating about like the national press covering Slipknot and talking about this part of the country like it's just absolutely devoid of culture when like everywhere had stuff like this happening all the time for the past 100 years. Like,
that just
people like making music and they are making music everywhere.
And you can really liken punk rock to folk music and you can really liken it to and you know, when I mentioned earlier, like Dubuque has been harvesting all these doom bands, that's where you start connecting like the bands with like a specific area of Iowa, you know, and you start to see like similarities pumping up. I mean, even the Quad Cities in like Davenport and Rock Island. I mean, that is a harsh blue collar, you know, that was a river town. I mean, similar to Dubuque.
Right.
And there is like this kind of like grungier, nastier sound that came out of both those areas at one time. So, I mean, just kind of like if you think of it as like a folklore or people like creating art and taking in what they're, you know, it's all been influenced by their environment and the fellow citizens. I mean, that to me is where this whole history gets really interesting. And you think about points in time and, you know, the Reagan years and all that, like what inspired all this?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Who are these people? What entered their brains to cause this
like
to
you
come
and
out?
you and I went through the Bush years, you know, with the W years, and you know that was a whole thing.
And we had a great time. Yeah.
Great time. Great time. The W years. And, you know, from W to Obama to Trump. And, you know, you see influxes and changes, you know, throughout all that. You see music change. And you're seeing Iowa go from a Republican governor to a Democratic governor to back to Republican governor, and you're seeing all these things. You see us go from purple state to red state, and you see the culture change, and you see the creative energies change from all that.
Right. And what people are using their preferred genre to like express, well, like what are they mad about is basically what I'm watching now is
that's what it is. I mean, that's
what are all these songs pissed off about now.
I mean it changes. I mean, obviously politics have a lot to do with it, but there's obviously other things. I mean, I think that's where I feel like the difference between like Slipknot's music and punk rock. Slipknot's music, which dives into that new metal and deals with a lot more like that same like energy that Korn has, which is inner turmoil and things like that.
The personal,
personal stuff. Punk rock is all about the external, and it's all about, you know, politics and civil rights, and I feel
usually
like there's a different energy,
collective spirit to it.
100%.
Yeah. This is completely different from what you were just saying, but I just noticed you have the Moog synthesizer demo from the University of Iowa 1979 in your archive. So I just pulled that up to see like who created that. The EMS director, Peter Todd Lewis. I went to the University of Iowa for grad school, so I was like part of the electronic music studios from 2012 to 2014, and this is really interesting that like you're the source of like having this archived, because shouldn't this be up somewhere more official?
Somewhere else. I can tell you that I found that on a file sharing thing, because every once in a while, like I'll just type in Iowa on like the equivalent to like SoulSeek or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that's where I found that. And I can tell you it's not that interesting. It's like, here's this tone, and we can put this, put this filter on.
Track 10 is filtered white noise, so I know there's a lot of fans of that.
Well, I'm not sure how much you know about my background. I started in the film industry as a musician, as a composer, and I actually went to school for audio engineering at the University of Colorado. I was in like this synthesizer club. So synthesis and electronic instruments have always been a passion of mine. When I grew up, I was really into Throbbing Gristle and Skinny Puppy. Yeah. And, I got into noise, like Japanese noise, like Masana and Merzbow and Heido Kaiden. And I was building instruments and devices in my garage and in my basement in Ely. And I would do before circuit bending became like this mainstream thing, I would go to Goodwill and buy children's toys and rewire them and short circuit them. I built my first theremin when I was 17, and I burnt my hand because I thought I was grabbing the antenna, and I grabbed the soldering iron. And the entire neighborhood learned I made a mistake.
Yeah, because they could smell your burning flesh, right?
They could smell my burning flesh, yeah. So I was doing that because I really, as a musician, like I could play a little bit of piano and I played bass guitar, but I was not a good musician. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of embraced the idea of chaos and noise and electronics, and I really didn't want to know how it all worked. I just wanted to know how to make oscillations and make noise. And sounds
like we have a lot in common. I don't care how it works.
Yeah, I actually saw you perform. I saw you perform when I came, because I came to the Werner Herzog thing.
Okay, I didn't realize you were there. That was my most well-attended performance, because they weren't there for me.
It was great. I mean, first off, I remember going in there. I think I actually texted Bridget, and I think that's your boy on stage right now. And it was that. I mean, that was a wild thing. First off, when I found out that Werner Herzog was going to be in Iowa City, I'm like, I gotta go.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, a lot of people felt that way because we sold that out.
Yeah, it was super cool. Experimental music's always been a very interesting thing to me, and I think it's just kind of this wild, wild west of the music genre. And when I was making instruments, and then what I used to do, I used to go to do you remember Mr. Movies in Cedar Rapids? I used to go there as a kid. And you could go and get, not a new release, but you could get 7 movies for $7 for 7 days. And if you're into numerology and the 777, da-da-da. But I would go get tapes. I would watch each movie once, just watch it. But then I would pop the tape back in, rewind it, and then it was plugged into my stereo. And I would put in a blank audio cassette, and I would just record each movie sound only onto a cassette. And then I would pop it into, I don't know what I was using to make music back then, but I would chop things up and make layers and make loops and things. And that made more sense to me than trying to learn an instrument. So then, and it was just very like kind of that cut up method. And it was a great way when you're like 16 and you don't have a job or money to, to like be creative, you know?
Yeah. And like doing weird little experiments like that is actually a very useful kind of skill to develop, like, cause what you were doing was you're doing like basic audio editing, and like now look at you now,
Yeah. Now it's funny because like I still wish I could compose music. I just don't have the time. My last like composing gig was, I did if you're familiar with the Japanese guinea pig series, there was an American version that came out in like 2011, 2012. And I scored the first 3 of those. But even on the shows I'm doing now, like Gay Bar, I hired this composer named David Dutch from LA, who we had some mutual friends, and he actually was on the music composing team for Guardians of the Galaxy, Suicide Squad, and he's working on the new Superman.
Yeah.
He didn't write the music. The composer wrote the music, but then he would then go work in synthesis. He would create the cues, using different types of instruments. Yeah. And so when I hired him, he asked me, cause he's heard some of my actual like music that I had done when I like non-noise stuff. And he's like, hey, do you want to like compose with me? Like I told him, like, I really don't have time, but what I did do is I gave him my archive of proprietary samples and sounds that I've created over the last 15 years. And he used that as like the basis for everything. So he would load up my sounds into like a granular synthesis or whatever.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so I'm in there.
That's great.
I just couldn't like write a theme or anything with him because I just didn't have time. But to have like, I'm basically like, it's like my blood going through his veins, to make it. So yeah, I mean, that's about the extent of me doing music. I did perform, last March. I did a noise show in Tiffin.
Oh shit. I wish I had known about that.
Yeah,
I'm so close to Tiffin.
Yeah, it's where it's Ben Smasher's been doing noise shows, and I came in. Mall of America played.
You know what? I did know about that show. I think I was working.
And yeah, it was cool. It was in his garage. It was it was a typical noise show where your audience is the other musicians,
Yeah.
But that's noise though. Yeah, I mean, that's noise shows. I mean, I don't think noise actually has fans. I think we just have peers, So
yeah, I mean, if someone starts as a fan, they become a peer very quickly because it's
basically they're like,
kind of a low barrier to entry.
Yeah. They're like, they seem to be having fun. Maybe I'll start a noise project. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how it works.
Yep,
there's no rules.
Speaking of shows that people don't come to, we have been talking for about an hour. We should probably start plugging stuff.
Oh, sure.
So, Kristian, what do you have coming up that people should know about?
Well, I mean, the things that are out there, that's the beauty part about the streaming world. My past shows, Last American Gay Bar is still available. It's from Out TV, but you can get it, on Apple, Roku, Amazon. Taken Together, I believe, is exclusively on HBO Max, to watch. And then, my upcoming movie that I'm producing, the documentary feature, Chiefsaholic comes out, I believe, December 18th. It's December, about the bank robber who is the crazy Chiefs fan. And that's going to be fun.
I'm very much looking forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be great. And then, every Thursday at 9, new episode of Iowa Basement Tapes drops. That'll go on till the end of time. We do have a screening for the last 3 episodes, a community screening of, Last American Gay Bar, the last 3 episodes at the Varsity Cinema, October 23rd. It's Blazing Saddles' 41st birthday. So,
right on. Yeah. And I think when you showed the first 3 there, that screening sold out, right?
It did. And this one is definitely heading that way.
Okay. Get on it quick, people.
Get on it quick. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, there is some other stuff coming up that I can't necessarily talk about yet. But I mean, the biggest thing is just, I always say, follow the podcast. I don't really do much with my website that much, as you can tell. But
I did read one sentence from it earlier, if you were listening.
That's the sentence that's on the whole thing. That is it. But, you can follow me on the IG. It's just I think it's just Kristian Day, or it's Kristian M Day. I'm not sure. But
I don't think there's an M in it. I think I was looking at that earlier.
Okay. Yeah. And then it's just at Kristian Day. That's like the only like form of social that I do much with anymore. But I'm out there, and, I'm always looking for, if anyone has any old archives from bands, I'm always on the hunt to preserve them. Actually, next year in April, the date hasn't been announced, but I'm actually doing a lecture at the Iowa State Historical Museum. I was invited, of all things, to do a lecture on Iowa basement tapes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was like a huge thing, because I've been trying to like get in with them and have them accept this as something that should be archived. Cause I still have a lot of the physical copies of this stuff I still have. And I'm like, my house isn't that big. And I'm trying to make sure they don't go, I actually have 4-track masters that I can't play without the actual 4-track recorder of bands. Cause this guy, my buddy Chuck, he was in No Consensus and Exit Wounds. He gave me like 12 boxes of things, and his band, he used to have a trailer in Waterloo, Iowa where he recorded bands, and I have all these master tapes now and I mean, I literally, you can't play them on a regular deck, because they're the raw and speed.
Right. Yeah.
But I also just can't, I'm looking at them on the flesh. I'm looking down. I'm looking at them. Cause I would love for them. They've been sitting here for like 6 months, and I want to find a place for them. But
yeah. Somebody's got to keep these and keep them safe.
I'm honestly hoping that like either, cause University of Iowa has a great archive of stuff in their library. I would love for someone here, maybe the historical museum or someone, to take them. Because as much as I like them, I don't need to have them invade my home any more than they have. So, we just need to preserve history,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, your show is a noble pursuit, making more people aware of the rich history of people making music in this state, which is overlooked by a lot of people who don't live here and aren't the ones making the music.
Well, I want to say, one thing to add, I was just thinking about this before we did the show, was like stuff to check out. I highly recommend if anyone visits there for the first time. I mentioned the Dogs. Absolutely check out the Dogs.
Yeah.
I would say this is a newer band, sort of. Like when I say newer, like 2012, so they're over 10 years old, and you might remember them. The Tanks. I have their demos up there. They're one of my favorites. There's one, if you go towards the bottom, because it's all, if you haven't figured it out, it's by year, and it goes later and later and later. And at the bottom, 1986 or 88, there's White Hot, which is a Des Moines hair metal band that actually toured with Kiss in Japan.
Man. That's a beautiful cover too, is them standing in front
Isn't
of
that awesome?
a private plane.
Yes. They rule. And then the band Rose, R-O-Z-E, should be around there too. I was working on in 2020 down in Ottumwa, working on a doc series called Queen of Meth, which is about Lori Arnold, Tom Arnold's sister.
One. I think my wife watched that one.
I worked on that. Yeah, I was the field producer on it, and awesome. I remember sitting with the director outside the Tom Tom, and he was asking about music, and two things I got done out of that conversation. They synced the song Dead Men Get No Tails by Rose, because they had actually performed in the 80s at Lori Arnold's bar down in Ottumwa. God. And I had just gotten that collection of Rose's albums from Jeff Shotwell, who is their lead guitar player. And I was like, you gotta, this is it. This band actually played there. And Lori, who was there, she was like, I remember them. They remember them playing here. Then, my favorite band in Iowa, who's current, still around, the oldest, longest running punk band, grindcore band, whatever you want to call them. They're from Ottumwa, Captain Three Leg, who started in 1995. They're now all 50 years old, and they're still going, and they're still putting out grindcore, hardcore, whatever. They actually synced up a couple of their songs in the show as well. And I put Andy Kettle, he runs Mortville Records out of Ottumwa. And, I had him come down to, the Tom Tom to meet with the director, and they just they vibed, and we were able to get a bunch of their songs synced on. I think it was like the last episode, maybe the second episode too. But honestly, that whole situation made, for me, Iowa Basement Tapes worthwhile, because I was able to take that music that I've been collecting and then work within the industry that does pay my bills and everything, and get this music out there in like a kind of a mainstream way, and they both projects got deals. They got paid. They got to do it. And to me, that's like that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
To have that exposure like that.
Yeah. Make that
Absolutely.
all work. Yeah. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening to this. I do want to plug a couple things here at the end. I'm playing a show on October 6th at Public Space 1 Close House. I'll be playing with Angle Grinder. The show is happening because Sex Funeral and Electro Gong are on tour together and wanted to stop in Iowa City. And you can find more shows I'm playing in the next couple months at justinkcomer.com/shows. Go to iHearIC.com for the archive of all the stuff I've done under that name, and rockhardcock.us for the whole podcast empire. Kristian said not to look at his website, but it is christianday.com. And listen to Iowa Basement Tapes. I think it's awesome. And check out his archive of tapes at iowabasementtapes.bandcamp.com. Thanks again, Kristian. I'm so happy that we were able to do this.
Yeah. And big plug for Sex Funeral. I'm stoked you get to play with BBJ.
Oh, I played with Bob so many times now. He's great.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites. Absolutely. I hung out with him at Monk's earlier this year and got a coffee with him. I mean, talk about a guy who is like just his range of music that he can do.
Yeah.
Is incredible.
Yeah. And his interests, and he's just so nice and friendly to everyone. Yeah. Lovely person. Yeah. Actually, you know what? Before we turn it off, out of your whole archive, what should I play at the end of this?
Oh man.
I usually play tracks like during the show, but since we're not like sitting together, it felt like that would be weird to just like stop the conversation. But
so the song that honestly, and I think this would be great because of, I'm sure you have a good Iowa City listenership, is I would say "Highlights" by Brazil off the record "Love Lost Her Job Today."
Cool. And that, I think I can get that off of the 319 Dude archive.
That's on 319 Dude. Yeah. I'm sorry, that's not on mine. But
yeah.
But
yeah,
do you want one from mine, or do you want mine? Okay.
Let's do Brazil.
I was going to say if it was mine, I don't know. I think the Brazil one is just like, that's something to me reminds me so much of my time growing up in Cedar Rapids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, just like what the music scene was back then. Yeah.
That's a good place to leave everyone, you know. And we all have shared memories of growing up in Cedar Rapids. And so as you listen to this, you know, reflect on your time in Cedar Rapids, a universal experience for all of us. Okay, that's everything. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
the wall. These are the things that we thought about. We were all kids. This was a terrible idea. I never should have come. I leave it to yourself. I leave it to yourself. Got your visions and the hell. I leave it to yourself. To yourself. What is left to say? Bring your friends to laugh. I grew to hate your face. It's everything you say. I forgot the day when I grew to hate your face. It's every word you said. It sounds like backpedal again. This sounds like backpedal again. This sounds like you're leaving out again. This sounds like you're leaving us again. This sounds like you are leaving us again. This sounds like you're leaving us again. This sounds like you are leaving us again. This sounds like you are leaving us again. What you say never meant up quite right. Doesn't ever did. Doesn't ever did. Hindsight is never clearer than the moment that you're looking in their eyes. When you think you've got it mapped out, you're presented with a surprise. Never distraction, never so much satisfaction. Like that, man, I say, on the head, conversations with your nation, where my actions recognize, I need you now, God, God, is on the head, my session, my satisfaction, this life, I'll go my life.